Have you ever felt like your own flaws, your own mistakes have disqualified you from God's blessing? Do you sometimes look at your life, at the messes you've made, and think to yourself, there's just no way God can truly use someone like me? If you've ever felt trapped in a cycle of struggle and failure, what I'm about to share will bring incredible hope to your soul. We are going to dive deep into the life of one of the most deeply flawed men in the entire Bible, Jacob. He was a liar, a manipulator, and a schemer from the moment he was born. Yet God not only used him, but chose him to become the father of his holy nation, Israel. How is this even possible? The answer reveals a powerful truth about how God's sovereign grace works, and it's a truth that can absolutely unlock the blessing over your own life. You cannot afford to miss what's coming. Stay with me until the very end, because the principle that transformed Jacob from a deceiver into a prince with God is the very same principle that can cause your greatest breakthrough. Before we start, let me know in the comments, have you ever felt like your life was a constant struggle? Just type, I am ready for my blessing, if you believe God can use you, no matter your past. It's amazing, a huge number of people who watch and are blessed by these videos aren't actually subscribed to the channel. So, if you believe God turns our biggest messes into his greatest messages, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button right now so you don't miss the powerful truths we're going to uncover. Let's begin our journey by looking closely at a story that truly sets the stage for a lifetime of conflict and divine purpose. You see, my friend, the story of Jacob doesn't start with a grand, heroic act, but with a desperate prayer and a perplexing prophecy. It all begins with his mother, Rebekah. She feels a violent turmoil within her womb, a battle so intense that it drives her to seek the Lord, crying out, "If all is well, why am I like this?" Genesis 25:22. And God gives her an answer that is the very blueprint for the drama to come. He reveals that she carries not just two sons, but two nations, two peoples who will be separated from birth, with one being stronger than the other, and, get this, the older will serve the younger. This wasn't just a casual prediction. It was a foundational piece of the divine covenant, a promise that would shape generations. Rebekah had to hold on to this promise with immense faith, even as the physical struggle inside her was a daily, painful reminder of the division to come. This divine word, spoken before they even had names, became the secret engine driving so many of the choices, both good and bad, that would follow. It's a powerful lesson on how God often reveals the destination. Long before he shows us the messy, winding road we must travel, a road that would be filled with heartache and a deep need for future redemption. Now, when the day finally comes, the birth itself is as symbolic as the prophecy. First comes Esau, red and hairy, a boy who seems to have the wilderness already in his blood. He's a hunter, a man of the field, robust and straightforward. And then comes Jacob, his hand clutching Esau's heel, earning him the name Yaakov, which means he who supplants or grasps the heel. What a way to enter the world, huh? Already striving, already reaching for what is ahead of him. This initial struggle in the womb spills out into their childhood, creating a rift that is, sadly, widened by their own parents. The scripture in Genesis 25:28 is heartbreakingly blunt. Isaac, who had a taste for wild game, loved Esau, but Rebekah loved Jacob. This favoritism, this quiet and persistent family deception where love is given conditionally, becomes the fertile ground for jealousy and bitterness. It's a sobering reminder for all of us, isn't it? The seemingly small biases we have within our own homes can create deep wounds that last a lifetime. This parental failure ensured that the boys' lives would be a constant struggle for blessing and identity, a struggle that tested their faith and set them on a collision course over the sacred covenant they were both born into. The tension that had been simmering for years finally boils over in a scene that feels so domestic, so mundane, yet its consequences are eternal. Picture this: Esau, The great hunter comes in from the open country, absolutely famished. He's spent, exhausted, and operating on pure instinct. And what does he smell? The rich, earthy aroma of a lentil stew that Jacob has been cooking. In that moment of intense physical craving, Esau's entire world shrinks to the size of that bowl. He says to Jacob, "Quick, let me have some of that red stew. I'm about to die." Genesis 25:30. Jacob, ever the opportunist, sees his chance. This is where his character, a complex mix of ambition and cunning, truly comes into focus. He doesn't just offer the stew out of brotherly kindness. No, he leverages his brother's moment of weakness in an act of calculated deception. He understands the immense value of the birthright, the spiritual, leadership, the double portion of inheritance, the lineage through which the covenant would flow. His faith in the importance of that promise was real, but his method of pursuing it was deeply flawed, kicking off a personal struggle with his own conscience that would follow him for decades. The dialogue that follows is one of the most chilling and pivotal in all of Genesis. Jacob says, "First, sell me your birthright." There's no hesitation. It's a direct, transactional demand, and Esau's response reveals everything about his character. "Look, I am about to die," he says. "What good is the birthright to me?" Genesis 25:32. What a tragic statement. He was so consumed by the temporary pangs of his stomach that he was willing to trade away an eternal sacred promise. He completely lacked faith in the unseen spiritual reality that the birthright represented. This wasn't just a bad deal, it was a profound spiritual failure. He despised his inheritance, treating God's covenant promise as if it were worthless. The struggle here wasn't really over a bowl of soup, but over two entirely different value systems. Esau valued the immediate satisfaction of the flesh, while Jacob, through his flawed methods of deception, at least valued the spiritual promise from God. This moment is a stark warning about how easily we can be tempted to trade our ultimate calling for temporary comfort, a choice that often leads not to satisfaction, but to a long and painful road toward eventual redemption. And so the deal is struck. Esau swears an oath, and Jacob gives him bread and lentil stew. The Bible tells us that Esau ate and drank, and then he got up and left. So Esau despised his birthright, Genesis 25:34. That's it. An eternal promise, the sacred covenant of his forefathers, was traded for a single meal. The casualness of it is what's so shocking. There was no remorse, no second thought. This single act of despising his spiritual inheritance set a course for his life and the life of his descendants. It was the first major victory for Jacob in his lifelong struggle for supremacy, but it was a victory won through a subtle and cruel deception. It planted a seed of resentment in Esau's heart that would soon grow into a murderous rage. This moment of flawed faith and broken brotherhood was the first domino to fall in a long line of events that would force Jacob to flee for his life, endure years of hardship, and ultimately wrestle with God himself for the redemption he so desperately needed. This was just the opening act, and as we'll see, the tangled web of their family was about to get a whole lot more complicated. All right, so if the lentil stew was the spark, what comes next is the full-blown explosion. This, my friend, is where the family's web of favoritism and deceit becomes an outright conspiracy. It all starts with Isaac, now old, blind, and feeling his mortality. He calls for Esau, his favorite, to go hunt and prepare a final meal so he can pass on the patriarchal blessing. But you see, Rebekah overhears this. Her fierce, if misguided faith in the prophecy that the older would serve the younger kicks into overdrive. She doesn't trust God to bring it about. She decides she must orchestrate it herself. This is a crucial moment of deception as she pulls Jacob into a scheme that is as daring as it is dishonest. Jacob himself is terrified, mind you. He's caught in a terrible struggle, fearing a curse more than he desires the blessing, as he tells his mother in Genesis 27:12, Perhaps my father will touch me, and I shall seem to him a deceiver, and I shall bring a curse upon myself and not a blessing. But Rebekah is relentless, even taking any potential curse upon herself. She is so convinced. This is the only way to secure God's covenant for her chosen son. Can you just imagine the tension in that tent? It's almost unbearable to read. Jacob, disguised with goat skins on his hands and neck, wearing his brother's clothes, approaches his blind father. The deception is in full swing, but it's a clumsy one. Isaac is immediately suspicious. He says those haunting words that echo through history. The voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau. Genesis 27-22. It's a moment of profound spiritual blindness, matching his physical blindness. Despite his doubts, he is ultimately fooled by the touch and the smell of the clothes. He bestows the blessing, the great patriarchal covenant of land, prosperity, and dominion. He seals Jacob's destiny with words of power and promise. In that moment, the theft is complete. Jacob has the blessing, but it has been secured at a terrible price, setting him on a path where the need for redemption would become the central theme of his life. The immediate victory of his struggle was won, but it came with a cost he couldn't yet comprehend. The fallout is immediate and devastating. No sooner has Jacob left than Esau returns, ready to receive his blessing. The discovery of the treachery is gut-wrenching. The scripture says that when Esau heard the news, he cried with an exceedingly great and bitter cry. Genesis 27:34. It's a cry of pure anguish, the sound of a man whose world has just been shattered by the ultimate betrayal. All he can get from his father are some leftover secondary blessings. That raw grief quickly hardens into a cold, murderous rage. He vows to kill Jacob as soon as their father dies. The family is utterly broken. The deception has fractured their lives, turning the internal struggle into an external threat of death. So, Jacob, the supplanter, becomes Jacob, the fugitive. Urged by Rebekah, he is forced to run for his life, leaving behind everything he has ever known. This isn't just a trip. It's an exile, a desperate flight that will lead him into the wilderness, alone, with nothing but a stolen blessing and the consequences of his actions. So as Jacob flees, he is utterly alone, a man on the run with nothing but the clothes on his back and a stolen blessing. But it's right here, at his absolute lowest point, that God intervenes. You see this pattern a lot, don't you? God meets us when we have nothing left to offer. In a dream at a place called Bethel, Jacob sees a magnificent stairway reaching to heaven, with angels ascending and descending. And God stands above it and speaks directly to him, reaffirming the very covenant he had stolen. He promises him land, descendants, and a divine presence. I am with you and will watch over you wherever you go. Genesis 28:15. This was not a transaction, it was pure grace. This powerful encounter ignited Jacob's faith, transforming his terrified flight into a purposeful journey. It was the first true step on his long road to redemption, a promise that even in his self-inflicted struggle, he wasn't walking alone. This divine assurance becomes the anchor for the next 20 years of his life, a period that would test him in ways he could never imagine. When Jacob arrives in Haran, what happens next is a classic case of what goes around comes around. He meets his match in his uncle Laban, a man who is arguably even more cunning than he is. After working 7 years out of love for Laban's daughter Rachel, a testament to his newfound resolve, he is hit with the shock of his life. On his wedding night, he is tricked. The architect of a great family deception becomes its victim when, in the morning, he discovers it was Leah. Genesis 29:25. The irony is staggering. Laban, with a straight face, explains it's simply not their custom to give the younger before the older. This forces Jacob into another 7 years of hard labor, a grueling struggle that deepens the bitter rivalry between the two sisters. Yet, it is through this painful, dysfunctional family dynamic that the 12 sons are born, the very patriarchs of the tribes of Israel. God was weaving the fulfillment of his covenant right through the messy, painful threads of human jealousy and strife. The final years in Haran are a masterclass in cunning versus cunning. Jacob, having learned from the best, uses his own form of clever strategy, some might call it deception, with Laban's flocks to build immense wealth for himself. The tension between them finally reaches a breaking point, and God tells Jacob it's time to go home. So, he flees once more, this time not as a lonely fugitive, but as the head of a massive household. Laban pursues him, of course, and their final confrontation ends not in violence, but in a treaty, a covenant of their own. This entire 20-year exile was a crucible. It was a long and arduous process of redemption, stripping Jacob of his youthful arrogance. The constant struggle taught him patience, and being on the receiving end of deceit taught him empathy. He left Haran a different man, wealthier and with a large family, but now he faced the ghost of his past, the terrifying prospect of meeting the brother he had so deeply wronged. As Jacob prepares to re-enter the promised land, he has to face the ghost he's been running from for 20 years, his brother, Esau. The news that Esau is coming to meet him with 400 men sends him into a spiral of absolute terror. You see, all his wealth and his large family mean nothing in the face of his brother's old grudge. The consequences of his past deception are finally coming due. This is where we see a profound change in him. He divides his family, sends waves of gifts ahead as a massive peace offering, and then he offers one of the most honest and desperate prayers in the Bible. He reminds God of his covenant promise, saying in Genesis 32, "I am unworthy of all the kindness and faithfulness you have shown your servant." This isn't the cunning schemer anymore. This is a man at the end of his rope, utterly dependent on God's grace. His external preparations are a strategy, but his internal struggle pushes him toward a raw and authentic faith. That night, alone and vulnerable by the Jabbok River, Jacob has the encounter that will define him forever. A mysterious man appears and begins to wrestle with him, and they struggle relentlessly until the break of dawn. Think about that. This is a physical, grueling, all-night fight. Just when it seems like a stalemate, the man touches Jacob's hip and wrenches it out of its socket, marking him for life. But Jacob, in his brokenness, does something extraordinary. He clings to his opponent. In an act of pure, tenacious faith, he gasps, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." Genesis 32:26. He's no longer trying to steal a blessing through deception. He's desperately clinging to the source of the blessing itself. It's here that he receives his new name, Israel, which means he struggles with God. This is the very climax of his redemption. He's no longer the supplanter. He's a man who has wrestled with God and prevailed, and the limp he carries away is a permanent reminder of his transformative encounter. The next morning, everything has changed. Jacob, now Israel, limps forward to meet his brother. He is physically weaker but spiritually stronger than he has ever been. He bows 7 times, a posture of complete humility, and the miracle he prayed for happens. Instead of a sword, he is met with an embrace. Esau runs to him, throws his arms around him, and weeps. The bitterness that had festered for 2 decades melts away in a moment of stunning grace and forgiveness. The violent struggle Jacob anticipated becomes a tender reconciliation. It's a beautiful picture of how a genuine encounter with God can radically change our human encounters. The healing of this broken relationship was the final, crucial piece of Jacob's redemption, allowing the family of the covenant to be made whole again, proving that God's power is truly made perfect in our weakness. You would think that after everything Jacob went through, he would have learned the poison of favoritism. But in a tragic twist of irony, he repeats the very sin of his parents. He openly adores Joseph, the son of his beloved Rachel. gifting him that famous tunic of many colors. To his other sons, that coat wasn't just a piece of clothing, it was a constant, visible symbol of their father's unequal love, a painful daily reminder that they were second best. This favoritism planted the same seeds of jealousy and bitterness that had defined his own youth. It fueled a hatred in the brothers so intense that it led them to conspire against Joseph, throwing the entire covenant family into a new and devastating struggle. It's a somber lesson, isn't it? That the very wounds we carry are the ones we are most likely to inflict on others, perpetuating a cycle of pain that calls out desperately for redemption. This time, Jacob wasn't the perpetrator of the scheme, but his actions certainly set the stage for the terrible deception that was to come. What his sons do next is chilling. They seize Joseph, throw him in a pit, and sell him into slavery. To cover their crime, they enact a cruel and calculated deception, perfectly mirroring the one Jacob used against his own father. They kill a goat, dip Joseph's beautiful tunic in the blood, and present it to Jacob. The old deceiver is now the one being deceived, and the lie shatters his world. His grief is absolute, a bottomless pit of sorrow. He refuses all comfort, famously declaring in Genesis 37:35, "I will continue to mourn until I join my son in the grave." For 22 long years, Jacob lives under this cloud of loss, his heart broken and his faith pushed to its absolute limit. This profound, personal struggle with grief defines his old age. He believes a part of the covenant promise has been devoured by a wild beast, a pain so deep it seems to suffocate all hope. But then, God orchestrates one of the most stunning reversals in all of Scripture. A severe famine forces the brothers to Egypt to buy grain, leading them directly to the powerful governor they don't recognize, their long-lost brother Joseph. The story of Joseph revealing himself is a masterclass in divine providence and forgiveness. When the news finally reaches Jacob, it is simply too good to be true. He is numb with disbelief. But when he sees the wagons Joseph sent, the Bible says his spirit revives. That spark of faith, so long dormant, bursts into flame. "My son Joseph is still alive," he exclaims. "I will go and see him before I die." Genesis 45:28. This is not just a reunion, it is the redemption of an entire family from the brink of starvation and despair. The journey to Egypt isn't a retreat, but a divine rescue mission, proving once again that God's covenant plan can never be thwarted by human wickedness. The last 17 years of Jacob's life, spent in Egypt, are a period of peace and reflection. The long, grueling struggle is finally over. On his deathbed, we see the man he has fully become, Israel, a true patriarch and prophet of God. In a beautiful, full-circle moment, he calls for Joseph's two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, to bless them. With his eyesight failing like his father Isaac's, he deliberately crosses his hands, placing his right hand on the head of the younger son Ephraim. Joseph tries to correct him, but Jacob says, "I know, my son, I know." Genesis 48:19. What once was the central conflict of his life, the younger supplanting the older through deception, is now a redeemed prophetic act. This isn't a theft, it's a divinely inspired choice, a final testament to his journey of redemption and his submission to God's sovereign will, which so often overturns human expectations. Then he summons all 12 of his sons, and the scene is filled with a profound spiritual authority. He is no longer the flawed man wrestling for his own identity. He is the voice of the covenant, speaking destiny over the future 12 tribes of the nation that will bear his name. He gives each son a specific prophetic blessing, outlining their characters, their future triumphs, and their future struggles. To Judah, he gives the promise of the scepter, the royal lineage from which the Messiah will one day come. He is now the true custodian of God's promise, a man whose intimate struggle with God has transformed him into a conduit for divine revelation. This is the final act of his leadership, a powerful moment where he transfers the weight and wonder of the covenant to the next generation. ensuring the legacy will continue long after he is gone. After all is said and done, Jacob gives one last command, and it is perhaps his greatest statement of faith. He makes his sons swear an oath not to bury him in Egypt, the place of their comfort and provision, but to carry his body back to Canaan and lay him in the cave of Machpelah with Abraham and Isaac. He is declaring with his dying breath that his true home is in the promised land, the land of the covenant. His long earthly pilgrimage was over, but his faith was fixed on the future God had promised. After his death, his sons honor his request with a great procession, a final testimony to a life that, despite all its flaws, turmoil, and deception, had found its ultimate purpose and redemption in the unwavering faithfulness of God. Jacob's journey from a deceptive schemer to a prince who wrestled with God is powerful proof that your past does not define your future in his kingdom. The blessing is often found not in our perfection, but in our persistent struggle toward him. So I have a question for you. After seeing how God transformed Jacob, what is the biggest struggle in your own life that you need to bring to God? Share your biggest takeaway from this story in the comments below. Your testimony could be the encouragement someone else needs to read today. If this message blessed you, make sure you are subscribed and have that notification bell turned on, because you don't want to miss the powerful biblical truths we are sharing next. And don't go anywhere. A new video that I've chosen just for you is appearing on your screen right now. Click on it, and let's continue this journey of faith together.